All right, there are some options if you do not want to use a locking belt at all. First are the more well-known options, before I hit the more unique options. The first one here doesn't get talked about enough, but it's intuition. Trust your gut. We don't always trust it. If you get a bad feeling about someone, you don't have to logic it out. You don't really need a reason to be cautious or avoid someone if you're constantly getting a negative feeling about them. Your subconscious has likely picked up on something. Follow it. Now, one thing about intuition, though, is it doesn't always work. For instance, I had a creepy neighbor when I was a kid ask me for my underwear, but my intuition never said that he was a bad person because little kids are often taught that neighbors are safe, and no one really taught me that they could even be bad. Also, if intuition worked all the time, we would just teach everyone always follow your intuition and it'll magically get you out of any situation. Intuition is not some supernatural failsafe. The fact that people say, oh, you should know, or she should have known that he was bad. You should know that these are a bad type of people. That doesn't work because you don't always get that bad feeling about somebody. Also, we've been taught to gaslight ourselves, and we don't always know how to say no. Say you're out with some friends, and then one guy offers to walk you home because he's a gentleman. And then he makes sure you get to your door because he's a gentleman. And then he wants to watch you open the door and make sure you get inside safely because he's a gentleman. And then he forces himself through the door because he never was a gentleman. Society doesn't teach people how to get out of these situations and how to say no. Society often promotes terrible ideas when it comes to chivalry, boundaries, romance, and a host of other things that can cause you to really second guess yourself. Coming from the 90s and 2000s when Twilight was all the rage and all these red flags were dressed up as romantic and ideal, it causes you to really doubt yourself and makes it harder to get out of bad situations. All right, on to number 2. So I suggest learning self-defense. And not just classes. You can start with books that you get from your library, either print or audiobooks. Just search self-defense. They're cheap. They allow you to be more flexible with your time. You can listen to them in the car or when you're doing some outdoor or housework. And what's great about them is they cover various common scenarios and mental tricks abusers use, as well as proper boundaries everyone should have. They also go into how to say no and get out of various situations. Some even have some simple and effective self-defense moves that you can use to physically protect yourself from abusers. Basically, a lot of these books have what they should have taught us in school. They teach on avoiding danger, and that's what self-defense is, avoidance. You will win 100% of the battles you don't fight. You don't even need to know any moves for a lot of situations. If you can avoid the whole situation, you win. And self-defense classes should cover much of this. Some are like 10-week programs. You come in for 2 hours a week. And then some programs are just 1 or 2 classes for 4 to 8 hours. And those can be a bit overwhelming. You likely won't remember everything if it's a one-time 8-hour class. So definitely read with those really long ones. And sometimes they just focus on self-defense moves and how to get out of a physical fight, which is good in that you are practicing with a person in a physical space using moves designed for weaker or smaller people against a larger opponent. But situational awareness and evasion tactics really have to be taught. It's a crucial part of this. So if they don't talk about that, grab a book. Also, books and refresher classes can help to keep you sharp. Now, some warnings I have about these is, number 1, sometimes they act like your intuition is the end-all be-all, and as we've discussed, it is not. Sometimes it does not go off at all. Number 2, some programs tell you to always be super vigilant, and that can lead to anxiety and paranoia, because really you're just not built to be hyper vigilant every moment of the day. And honestly, it would likely cause you to overthink and or freeze. The third thing is some of them like to recount capital R stories in detail. They throw the word out a lot and it can be a bit triggering, so do watch out for that. If that's a problem for you, I would suggest using the written format because you can always just close the book as opposed to audio where it might be playing and you might be driving or something and it might be hard to turn it off before it starts just going into that story. The last thing is classes can sometimes offer these overcomplicated moves that have like 9 steps, and you are not going to remember 9 steps in a situation like that. Maybe at most 3 if you've been practicing and if you have muscle memory, and or they don't offer any type of sparring. You might have another person and they're pretending to slowly move, but they aren't really stress tested at all. And so do keep that in mind when you're looking for these programs. Are their moves flashy or are they effective? The third option is martial arts. So actually, I do like and support martial arts. In a previous video, I went over some of the pitfalls of martial arts and how the belts mitigate many of those pitfalls. But there is definitely a place for martial arts. In fact, a friend of mine took down her abuser using either judo or jujitsu, I can't remember. It's especially good if you are being repeatedly attacked or have a known physical abuser. It's very useful. It builds muscle memory and helps keep you sharp. Now, picking a good one can sometimes be difficult. Many make promises that they don't really keep. So when I was a kid, I took Taekwondo, but they just focused on the forms. The forms were unnatural because we never practiced in a sparring session where you could really get a feel for how and when to use these moves and make them instinctual. The moves looked good, but without real practice, they're not going to work. And in a real situation, I'm either just going to freeze or I'm going to punch and kick like I normally do, but I'm not going to use all these movements and stuff because they were never ingrained in us. Stuff to keep in mind when picking a martial art. A lot of them can be sport oriented, which means they're not focusing on street fighting. They have these rules and it's about what would help you score more points in a competition for that specific martial art. Many do not offer any type of sparring or stress testing, and so they're not really applicable or effective in the real world. Another thing some of them do is tell you to run towards the danger. That is the exact opposite of what you want to do. If you're in a real fight, it's not going to be fair. The other person has the element of surprise. They may have a weapon. They may be stronger than you. You do not run towards the danger. You want to know how to defend yourself, but you don't want to have to use it. A good test for is this a good martial art for self-defense is within 3 months, you should have a pretty good grasp of the movements. And definitely by a year, you should have a significant advantage over someone who has not trained, which is most people. So what I would suggest is first reading some self-defense books and or taking some self-defense classes. Know situations and know how to evade them. Then taking a good martial art to help build and keep that muscle memory and physical readiness. All right, the fourth option is weapons. Just like martial arts, I went over the pitfalls of weapons, but I do support learning and using weapons for self-defense. You do not want a fair fight. You are defending yourself from someone who wants to harm you. Improve your odds if you can with weapons. Because unlike in a martial arts class where you walk in knowing you need to fight, where you have a proper mindset, you're wearing proper clothes, with mats to fall on, supervision, and someone who's going to stop when you say to. The attacker has the element of surprise, and since they chose this fight, they're likely stronger and bigger than you. Don't fight fair, because it's already not a fair fight. Improve your odds any way you can. So I don't have a whole lot of advice for weapons other than pick one or a couple that suits your needs and is legal in your area, and then train. Also, especially if you've got pepper spray, test it every once in a while. Make sure that it still works. Research and or take classes on the weapons that you choose and make sure that they are easily accessible. And build up that muscle memory so that you're less likely to freeze and you can use them effectively. Now, warnings on all of these more common things. Weapons, self-defense, martial arts don't work if you do happen to freeze. Hopefully, though, you've trained enough with them that you don't freeze. They also, unfortunately, do not work if you're unconscious. Also, you can get reprimanded if you go too hard or use them wrong in certain cases. So do learn the laws in your area. And now on to the more unique options. For the first one, I have seen people use basically a fake bloody tampon. It works as a deterrent because some people are very squeamish when it comes to blood and/or tampons. And if you put fake blood on it, sometimes that can show you if something happened, because if someone pulls it out, the fake blood will likely get on your clothes or your skin. What is nice about this one is it works if you're unconscious, and it can be used with any outfit. Another one I've heard of is basically somebody starts to try something and you say, I have some STD, and you just start explaining it and going into immense detail on what it is and what the symptoms are. What's nice about this one is you don't need to carry an object with you. All you need to do is know the symptoms and maybe medications associated with the STI. One of the problems is that you can freeze. Sometimes it's really hard to talk and get your brain to work when something happens. And so again, you can freeze, or you may be unconscious, which would mean that wouldn't work. Another one is cameras. I know some people have cameras in their house. So let's say, you're with someone in your living room. You can definitely have cameras in your living room. It works as a deterrent. If somebody tries something, you can point at the camera to make them think, oh, I'm being watched. And sometimes even if you're unconscious, if it's out in the open and it's obvious, it may be enough of a deterrent to the attacker. And what's great is it can work as a deterrent even if the camera doesn't work or is fake, because just having it there may stop them. But if it does work, it can provide evidence if something does happen. And again, yes, you can film your own living room. You can pretty much film anywhere in the house, just as long as it's not where someone is expected to change clothes, like a bedroom or the bathroom. Although, if a crime like capital R happens, then often the footage from even the bedroom and the bathroom is okay to use, depending on the laws where you live. Now, there are also wearable cameras or audio recorders. And again, if you're wearing them and a crime is committed, you can often use that footage in court. Now, the last one is if you have a smart speaker in your house or a voice assistant on your phone or smartwatch. You can say, hey, smart speaker, call 911 or call my dad or someone. That is likely to cause them to stop. Now, if you don't call 911, say call a family member or friend, it's a good idea to tell that family member or friend, hey, a person is coming over. Please answer your phone if I call. That way it just doesn't go to voicemail or something. But if the attacker stops at any point and you can get out of there, just do that, because your friend may not answer. So it's just something to keep in mind. All right, that is all that I could come up with for options that don't include locking belts at all. Thanks for listening, and let me know what you think. Now, with all my videos on my channel, feel free to share them. You can put them on your own channel or make your own take on these designs. All I ask is that you add a link or so to my channel and or other videos, just so that as I make these videos, your audience can see the other options, the other videos, so they don't have to go around the internet trying to find the rest of this. I hate that. So please leave the links in the description or in a comment that you pin to the top.
And leave the comments on, because I'd love to see what your audience thinks.